Welcome to big armies, orbital airstrikes, and map-wide front lines in this, the free demo for Ashes of the Singularity 2. Thank you to Stardock for sponsoring this video. I'll chuck a link to the demo live now in the description below. I'm playing today as the Post-Human Coalition, the PHC, on this, the demo's largest map, and we're running one full match, time jumping around to some of my favorite moments. Early on here, it's all about territory and tempo. It's about claiming some early regions, for of course we just start with one, grabbing resource nodes, crucially the two available at the start of the game, as well as building some early army buildings like factories. Defensive buildings perhaps not so much. Here for me, it's all about the territory grab in this setup phase, because it's about laying the foundation and building some momentum towards some of the bigger stuff and the greater constructions down the line. Here you also get a quick look at the slightly reworked, revamped user interface, as well as the overall experience in Ashes 2 at the territory level. Early on, of course, neutral territories aren't all that well defended, and this brilliant commander unit does a fantastic job at stomping its way through neighboring territories. So building a quick base of operations and getting some resources online is totally doable in this mode. From here, I can also start to access some technologies. And this is really important because this is where matches start to branch out. It's not just like a plus 2% or plus 5% kind of upgrade. It's actual real tools, additional units, things that can shape how fights properly play out. Truly branching paths of development. In this case, I've opted for the aerial support, mainly for the visual spectacle, but also because it does tend to be pretty effective, as well as some of these orbital abilities. We'll get to the orbital strike later on as I work my way through the tree, but for now, I'm going to use it to quickly deploy some extra, skirmishes, largely scouting units for me, as well as the early orbital scouting unit to try and get a feel for the map around me, the adjacent territories, and where my enemies may be, for before you know it, wham bam, there you go. We're running into our first enemy. In this case, it's the purple faction. I should note in this demo, by the way, multiplayer is available. This is a single player match. Again, on the large map, so that means 8 total players, including me. But if you want to jump into the demo yourself while it's live, you can absolutely play multiplayer and teach your friends a thing or two, because that's right, you watched the JumboPixel video ahead of time. Speaking of time, as I begin to advance into the game a little deeper here, you'll notice I'm starting to develop things like acolytes and some of my larger units. And that is another key part of the strategy here, as the first real fights, proper engagements begin to kick off, and this is where Ashes 2 starts to really click. And of course, this is all about domination, for victory for me here will only be achieved if I can manage to spread my red army across the entire map. And so that means rapid, fast development. Granted, I don't quite get the balance right. Personally, I tend to be very resource heavy, and perhaps a little slower on things like logistics to keep my armies supplied and functioning, and actually be able to build larger armies, greater forces. However, on balance, I really do like the idea of fortifying a homeland and building a front line, and I think that this new faction here in this demo build in particular does a great job at that. Some of the defensive structures, like these missiles, these you can see sort of firing across into neutral territory, are also my best friend. For even a small enemy army in a massive scale RTS like this can be very dangerous. Now we push into green territory, and this is, I think, a great moment and another key little part of my strategy. I'm using my deployment powers to simply drop units behind the front line, within my vision range, hitting territories from angles that perhaps they're not quite ready for, and expanding this theater of war around the side of the green, teal enemy, while they also crack some of my inner territories. It's a little bit messy here. Granted, a little messy. Never fear, though, because ultimately it is also an RTS game of scale, and that scale applies to armies. So while I also collect some loot, I destroy the enemy's capital here, capturing the territory for myself, and, as you can see by the mini-map, honestly hoovering up a nice kind of 1/3 and a nice cohesive third of the map. That allows the territories to connected with power supply, allowing them to keep functioning. If we don't have that solid connection, they will not work properly. So not only do I need to keep them defended, built, maintained, but also connected here, as I've built a pretty solid front line. And zooming out, this is where the match stops feeling like little skirmishes and starts feeling like the fulsome campaign that it is always destined to be, unless of course you get knocked out right at the start like a poor purple friend. Anyway, at roughly 1/3 of the map, the question I think becomes something like, how do I convert this into a clean endgame? Perhaps with decisive blows like this, just pounding in. With a largely land base, but a little bit of air force, huge mechanical force to pierce the enemy capital and mop up the somewhat undefended and underdeveloped, frankly, territories around the outside once I've done that. That is by far and away the best way to crack the AI on lower difficulties. I would, of course, note there's a reason why I'm not playing on the maximum difficulties here. It's because I'm simply not good enough. Putting that to one side, I do have some much better orbital effects. Deep strike squads, mechanical units, all sorts of things that I can drop into place and use to push along the side of the map. For of course the side of the map is kind of like a guaranteed safe zone. You can still have the enemy sneak around and take territories here, of course, but fundamentally it's a spot where no one can actually go. Or you could use your orbital strikes like this in the middle of the map to blast your way through and support your growing armies. That is not the only time you'll see me use the orbital strike, because I love to use it and try and just use it on cooldown, even if frankly the use case isn't even there. I just think it's fantastic. Either way, both options, whether you're pushing along the side or orbital striking and piercing your way through the middle, great ways to gain momentum as you deal with the growing pains of an expanding empire and maybe just so many resources you can't manage them. Logistics will become more important here. So too will building more and more of the same type of army infrastructure. As you're looking to train, say, more air units, getting more buildings online will help you train them faster. And maybe get them into the fight a little bit closer to the action as well. So there's a huge strategic advantage in expanding your territories. I've found that fighting on faster speed is generally okay, but when it comes to development, I like to go down to the speeds at the bottom right-hand corner of the minimap of the screen and change it down to a slower one. I prefer not to quite go all the way to full pause, just so things are still at least slowly moving, and I can slowly see infrastructure, buildings, whatever, being built, or units moving in the broad direction that they'll be going. Just a couple of quick time tips there as my beautifully big armies start to stomp down on the enemy territories, and I'm beginning to move into the end game, but not without some frustrations. Here, the blue player piercing through into my territory, it really doesn't take much if a front line is not properly defended, and this is by far and away my greatest growing pain. Thankfully, the ability to orbital drop in some units here, to quickly drop in a squad and deal with 1 or 2 rogue enemies, does kind of allow you to kind of mop stuff up and then focus back in on the fight. Of course, piercing not just at their capital, but maybe key territories with defensive buildings or industry, their manufacturing capacity, just to try and cripple that infrastructure as I pierce my way in. And so, as we're pushing into orange, same pattern. Break the line, take the regions, collapse the core. And at this point, the map is basically settling up for the final act. Blue is the last major holdout, and while they are fracturing my somewhat fragmented front line, my overall power, my overall industrial capacity, even with logistics as a huge weak spot, is enough to take them down, push through these territories, and encircle the capital. I find that maybe every single one isn't needed, and one great big push at the end is the most satisfying way to take them out. Obviously using any and all abilities I have to try and flank them, to try and sneak around, get a little bit of extra vision, and move in with my massive units for some total aerial domination. I mean, just look at these huge units. These poor guys didn't stand a chance at the end of the day. I was a little bit stretched, but ultimately got to my end goal here, taking out the final player and securing the victory. In this, the free demo for Ashes 2. At the end of the game, I get a nice little overview at just how well I did, and some nice breakdowns, some graphs of different areas where maybe I could have done a little better. Clearly, a few weak spots and some points to improve on in my next campaign. For now, thank you very much for watching. If you want to play the demo yourself, it is live as of the 23rd of February 2026, and of course, totally free to play. So, the link will be in the description. I strongly encourage you to give this game a go while you can. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.